Ladies and gentlemen, in the spirit, we live in a world that says, fight back, clap back, hit harder, but I have a mystery to reveal to you today, a contradiction, a paradox, a key of the kingdom that turns the lock in reverse. Don't fight back, fool them, because the enemy, the accuser, the adversary, the serpent, expects your retaliation. He thrives on reaction. He feeds off your anger. He lures you into the arena of flesh, where he rules. But what happens when you refuse to fight on his terms? You confuse him, you disarm him, you fool him. Do you not remember the Master? Yes, you are Jesus. He stood silent before Pilate, like a lamb before the shearers. The crowd jeered, the soldiers mocked. Satan thought he had won. He saw the nails, he saw the blood. He thought, I have crushed the seed of the woman. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that in the moment of greatest weakness came the greatest overthrow. The cross was not defeat, it was a trap. God baited Satan with death and then turned the weapon back on him. It was the divine judo move, so what does that mean for you? When you are insulted, do not fight back. Bless instead. When you are betrayed, do not curse. Forgive. When you are struck, turn the other cheek. And as you do, you ascend to a higher realm, one the enemy cannot access. It is written, he who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. Proverbs 16:32. The fool explodes, the wise man surprises, the warrior of God confounds. This is the power of the Lamb. And hear me now, meekness is not weakness, it is not cowardice. Meekness is strength held in restraint. It is power under command. It is the war horse that does not trample though it could. It is the lion who chooses silence. The kingdom of darkness cannot understand this. The world has no defense for it. When you respond with peace, you leave the adversary swinging at shadows. When you walk in humility, you walk with God. And God does not lose battles, so don't fight back. Fool them. Be the storm in stillness. Be the fire that does not burn. Be the thunder wrapped in silence. Let your restraint be your rebellion. Let your calm be your conquest. For the foolishness of God is wiser than the wisdom of men, and the silence of the Lamb was louder than the armies of Rome. From the very beginning, the story of God has been a story of paradox, of unexpected twists, hidden wisdom, and victories that emerge not through might, but through mystery. The ways of the Almighty are not the ways of man. What seems weak, he declares strong. What appears foolish, he calls wise. And what looks like defeat, he turns into victory. Consider this, when man fell in the garden, the enemy thought he had won. He had corrupted the image bearers, brought the curse upon creation, and introduced death into paradise. But hidden within the judgment was a prophecy, a riddle wrapped in promise. The seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent. What kind of warrior would come from the womb of the broken? How could the bruised become the crusher? Already the divine paradox had begun. The pattern repeats throughout the word. Gideon, with an army whittled down to 300 men, defeats an innumerable host, not with swords, but with jars, torches, and the shout of the Lord. David, a shepherd boy, rejects the armor of kings and takes up 5 smooth stones to fell a giant that no warrior dared face. Elijah, one man on a mountain, calls down fire against the prophets of Baal, not through strategy or numbers, but through bold faith and heaven's flame. Again and again, the scriptures tell us something that confronts the logic of this world, that the high will be brought low, and the low will be exalted, that the first shall be last, and the last shall be first, that strength is made perfect in weakness. It is not the warrior with the loudest shout, nor the king with the biggest army who prevails, but the one who walks in step with the mystery of God. The greatest paradox of all is the cross. No scene in history looks more like defeat. The Son of God beaten, bloodied, pierced, hanging in agony between heaven and earth. The earth shook, the sky turned black, and those who followed him scattered in despair. The adversary celebrated, the kingdom of darkness rejoiced. But they did not know, could not know, that what looked like death was actually life breaking forth, that the blood spilled was not the end but the beginning, that the lamb slain was also the lion rising. The cross was the ultimate divine reversal. It was not merely a moment in time, it was a cosmic unveiling. God chose the tool of Roman execution to be the doorway to eternal redemption. He chose the weakness of the flesh to confound the strength of the wicked. He chose silence to answer accusation, surrender to overcome violence, love to overthrow hate. That is divine subversion. That is the paradox of the kingdom. Even Paul speaks of it in his letter to the Corinthians. The message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God. The wisdom of this world cannot comprehend the ways of God. The enemy looks for power and is fooled by humility. He looks for vengeance and is disarmed by mercy. He looks for battle and is undone by peace. So too must we walk in this paradox. If we live by the sword, we fall by the sword. But if we live by the Spirit, we rise even when struck down. God calls us to overcome not by returning blow for blow, but by refusing to play the enemy's game. That is not passivity, it is prophetic strategy. That is not cowardice, it is kingdom warfare. You want to overcome, then lose your life to find it. You want to be free, then become a servant. You want to win the battle, then lay down your arms and pick up the cross. The victory is not always in the strike. It is in the restraint, not always in the shout, but sometimes in the silence, not always in the fire, but in the still small voice. This is the paradox of Scripture. This is the mystery of divine victory, not through confrontation, but through subversion, not by fighting back, but by fooling the enemy with the wisdom of God. When Jesus stood in the Garden of Gethsemane, and the soldiers came bearing swords and clubs, it would have taken only a word, a breath, a whisper from the word made flesh to bring down legions of angels. And yet he did not call them. When Peter drew his sword to defend the Son of God, Jesus told him to put it away. Those who live by the sword will die by the sword, he said, for the war that was about to be waged was not one of flesh and blood. It was not a war fought with blades or shields. It was a war fought in the Spirit, a war for the souls of men, and Jesus, the commander of heaven's armies, would win it not by fighting back, but by fooling the enemy with a victory cloaked in defeat. The powers of darkness could not understand it. They had watched him feed the multitudes, raise the dead, walk on water, and silence the storms. They had seen his authority over demons, over disease, over death. They had heard him speak as no man had ever spoken, but now he stood silent before his accusers, silent before Pilate, silent before the Sanhedrin. Like a lamb before its shearers, he opened not his mouth. It was not weakness, it was divine restraint. It was not surrender, it was strategy. The adversary, Satan, the ancient serpent, believed he had the upper hand. He had moved in the heart of Judas. He had stirred the mob. He had pierced the hearts of religious leaders with envy and rage. He had turned Rome against the Son of God. And as Jesus was scourged, mocked, spat upon, crowned with thorns, and nailed to a Roman cross, the enemy believed he had won. He thought he had destroyed the seed of the woman. He thought he had silenced the word. He thought he had buried the light. But what the enemy did not know, what he could not perceive, was that the very act that looked like the ultimate defeat was in truth the trap of the ages. The cross was the weapon hidden in plain sight. It was the place where sin would be judged, where death would be crushed, and where the veil between heaven and earth would be torn. In the moment of what looked like greatest weakness, the Son of God was executing the greatest overthrow in all of history. He was not the victim, he was the victor. He was not overcome, he was overcoming. As he hung suspended between heaven and earth, his blood fell to the dust, redeeming the ground itself. The nails did not hold him to the wood, love did. The crown of thorns that mocked his kingship became the coronation of the suffering king. And when he cried out, "It is finished," he was not speaking of defeat, but of fulfillment, of a war completed and a sentence paid in full. The enemy had been fooled. He had orchestrated the death of the one who would undo him. In seeking to destroy the Christ, he unwittingly paved the way for his own destruction. Paul would later write that if the rulers of this age had understood the mystery, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But they did not understand. Because the wisdom of God is not like the wisdom of this world, it operates in a different realm, a higher logic, a deeper truth. Jesus' refusal to fight back in the natural was his way of conquering in the supernatural. He didn't resist arrest, he submitted. He didn't argue with Pilate. He stood in silence. He didn't call for angels. He bore the cross, and in doing so, he revealed a secret of the kingdom. That true power is not proven by how hard you strike, but how deeply you love. That real victory is not found in retaliation, but in redemptive sacrifice. That the cross, Rome's tool of humiliation, would become heaven's altar of triumph. This is why the enemy was powerless against him. Because Satan understands pride, but not humility. He understands rage, but not mercy. He understands fear, but not love. The humility of Christ, the forgiveness from the cross, the bleeding compassion of God, these were foreign weapons to the kingdom of darkness. And because the enemy did not understand, he was deceived, so Jesus did not fight back. He fooled them, he fooled the powers of this age, he fooled the rulers of darkness, and he teaches us now, when you refuse to descend into the darkness of retaliation, you rise into the light of resurrection. When you walk in his footsteps, you walk the narrow path that leads not only to the cross, but through it to victory, and the enemy is left speechless once again. There is a war taking place, not in the headlines or in the streets, but in the unseen realm. A war not of nations, but of kingdoms, not of bombs or blades, but of light and darkness, truth and deception, spirit and flesh. This war is older than time, waged in the heavenlies before the foundations of the world were laid. And if you belong to Messiah, you are part of it whether you want to be or not. But here is the mystery. The battle tactics of the kingdom are unlike anything the world has ever known. In the natural, warfare is loud. It is visible, aggressive, calculated, and brutal. But in the kingdom of God, spiritual warfare often comes clothed in what appears to be weakness, not in shouting, but in silence, not in the clenched fist, but in the open hand. Not in retaliation, but in restraint. The kingdom's victories are won not by overpowering the enemy with force, but by baffling him with divine contradiction. The enemy of your soul understands hostility. He understands rage, revenge, accusation, chaos. He is the master of those tools, for they are forged in his domain. But when you meet hatred with forgiveness, when you respond to slander with silence, when you endure the fire and yet do not burn with bitterness, you throw the enemy into confusion. You are fighting a war on a level he cannot access. Consider the Messiah. He stood accused before Pilate and yet said nothing. His silence spoke louder than 1,000 protests. When he was nailed to the cross, he didn't curse his executioners. He prayed for them. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That was not weakness. That was not surrender to evil. That was the deepest act of war, a holy ambush, the act of divine sabotage against the kingdom of hell. When you show love in the face of hatred, you don't just disarm your attacker. You expose the emptiness of the attack. When you bless those who curse you, you release something into the spiritual atmosphere that no demonic force knows how to stop. The devil doesn't know what to do with meekness. He has no counter, weapon for peace. He has no defense against mercy. That is why spiritual warfare is not what many imagine. It is not always loud prayers, shouted declarations, or violent intercession, though those have their place. Often, it is the quiet obedience to the Spirit that brings the enemy to his knees. When you walk in the Spirit, you wage war simply by not playing the game of the flesh. The world says, get even. The Spirit says, forgive. The world says, defend yourself. The Spirit says, trust in God. The world says, win at all costs. The Spirit says, lose your life for my sake, and you will find it. Even in your suffering, you become a weapon, not by escaping it, but by enduring it in faith. For when you suffer injustice with grace, and when you choose righteousness even when it costs you everything, you become a living rebuke to the powers of darkness. You become a contradiction in the battlefield. A soldier who fights without striking, a warrior whose victory is marked not by bloodshed, but by brokenness healed and hearts transformed. It is written, "We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world." And yet, how do we wrestle them? Paul tells us to put on the armor of God. But what is this armor made of? Truth, righteousness, peace, faith, salvation, the word, prayer, not iron or steel, but spirit and truth. And so, the mystery is this: you win not by overpowering, but by outlasting. You overcome not by dominating, but by surrendering to the one who already won. For the Lamb has overcome, and he did not do it with a sword in his hand, but with nails in his hands. And if he won that way, then you will too. So the next time the battle comes to your door, in the form of insult, betrayal, injustice, persecution, do not reach for the carnal weapon. Do not strike back. Stand still, walk in peace, clothe yourself with humility, and in doing so you will become a mystery the enemy cannot solve. Because true spiritual warfare is not about appearing strong. It's about being aligned with the strong one. It's not about proving yourself, it's about manifesting him, and the enemy cannot defeat what he cannot understand. In the eyes of the world, meekness is weakness. It is interpreted as timidity, frailty, and inability to stand one's ground. But in the kingdom of God, meekness is something far different. It is not the absence of strength, it is strength restrained. It is the warrior who chooses not to draw the sword even though he can. It is the lion who knows he is a lion, and therefore has no need to roar. Meekness is power under control, fire behind glass, thunder cloaked in silence, and it is one of the greatest weapons in the arsenal of heaven. The Scriptures do not merely suggest meekness, they exalt it. It is written, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Not the proud, not the bold, not the aggressive, but the meek, those who do not need to proclaim their power, because they walk with the one who holds all power in his hands. The meek inherit not because they conquer, but because they trust. They receive not by grasping, but by surrendering. They rise by going low, and the enemy cannot understand it. Satan is driven by pride, and pride cannot comprehend meekness. Pride is loud, meekness is quiet. Pride demands, meekness endures. Pride inflates itself, meekness humbles itself. Pride shouts from the rooftops, meekness prays in secret. And so, when the enemy attacks and finds himself met not with retaliation, but with calm surrender, with a heart that doesn't break but bends, he is thrown into confusion. He expects a fight, but he is met with peace. He expects rage, but he encounters gentleness, and in that moment he loses his grip. Meekness is not giving up, it is holding back. It is the discipline of the Spirit to remain unshaken while everything around you shakes. It is Moses, who the Bible says was the meekest man on earth, leading a rebellious nation through the wilderness, not with shouting, but with intercession. It is David, refusing to strike Saul even when he had the chance, though Saul sought his life. It is Joseph, rising to power in Egypt, but choosing forgiveness over vengeance when his brothers stood helpless before him. The meek are those who have learned that true power lies in trusting the sovereignty of God more than the impulses of man. They know that vengeance belongs to the Lord, that justice is not theirs to force, but his to deliver. They carry themselves with the stillness of eternity, because they are not moved by the tides of flesh. And so the enemy who thrives in chaos is paralyzed in the face of their peace. Even Jesus described himself this way, "I am meek and lowly in heart." This is the Messiah, the King of Kings, the Creator of the universe, and he defines himself not by thunder or fire, but by meekness. He rode not a war horse into Jerusalem, but a donkey. He did not come to crush Rome, but to carry a cross. He did not silence his accusers with power, but with silence, and in doing so, He overturned the systems of darkness not with rage, but with righteousness. This is what the enemy cannot anticipate. Meekness is a foreign language to the kingdom of darkness. It has no file for it, no strategy against it. Every demon understands rebellion, but they do not understand surrender to God. Every force of evil understands domination, but they are powerless against humility. When you walk in meekness, you are clothed in a garment the enemy cannot pierce, because you are not relying on your own strength. You are hiding in his. Meekness does not mean being trampled. It means being unshakable in the face of provocation. It means your spirit remains anchored even when your name is slandered. It means choosing mercy when you are justified in wrath. It means responding to injustice not with bitterness, but with grace. And in that choice, you become a mirror of the Messiah. You reveal his nature. You become dangerous to the darkness, not because you strike, but because you don't have to. So do not despise meekness. Do not mistake it for passivity. It is the signature of those who walk closely with God. It is the mark of spiritual maturity. It is the quiet power that speaks louder than thunder. And it is the very thing that baffles hell. Because when you choose to be meek, you align yourself with the one who conquered not with might, but with mercy, not with war, but with the cross, and the enemy still hasn't recovered from it. The great danger is not merely that evil exists in the world, it is that it seeks to replicate itself. Evil does not just want to strike you, it wants you to become like it, to mirror its nature, to take on its voice, its tone, its reflexes. Evil wants to provoke in you the very same darkness that first attacked you. It whispers, strike back, curse them as they cursed you, mock them as they mocked you, hate them as they hated you. But the moment you answer evil in its own tongue, you are no longer just attacked by it. You've been converted by it. You become part of the cycle. The virus of darkness spreads, but the call of the kingdom is the opposite. It is written, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. This is not weakness. It is warfare, not pacifism. It is strategy. You overcome evil not by echoing it, but by confronting it with something it cannot understand. Something higher, something holy. When someone strikes you, and you refuse to strike back, but instead turn the other cheek, not from fear, but from faith, you become a living paradox. You testify that your spirit is governed by a higher throne. When they curse you, and you bless them back, not out of naivety, but from the depth of divine love, you put the darkness to shame. When you are betrayed, and you choose forgiveness instead of revenge, the accuser has nothing to cling to. You rise above the gravitational pull of sin, and you walk in the atmosphere of heaven. This is not natural, it is supernatural, and that is precisely the point. Darkness feeds on darkness. Evil multiplies when it is matched. But when you respond with light, you break the cycle. The enemy depends on your reaction. He crafts attacks not only to wound, but to reshape you. But when you choose good, when you respond with the unexpected, you confound him. You expose the weakness of evil. You reveal that it has no real power over one who has been transformed by grace. This is what Yeshua did again and again. When the woman was caught in adultery and thrown before him, the religious leaders expected him to respond with law, with condemnation. Instead, he responded with mercy, and in doing so, he exposed their own sin. When tax collectors, lepers, and prostitutes came to him, the world expected rejection. He responded with compassion, and the darkness of their shame could not remain. The Messiah did not mirror the evil he encountered. He overcame it with healing, with forgiveness, with goodness that radiated from another realm, and he has called you to do the same. It is a holy reversal. A divine subversion. When you respond to insult with kindness, you shame the insult. When you answer betrayal with grace, you take the power out of the hands of the betrayer. When you love your enemies, you strip away their ability to control your spirit. That is victory, not that you silenced your enemies, but that you refuse to let them change who you are in God. The world says, defend yourself. The kingdom says, die to yourself. The world says, get even. The kingdom says, be merciful as your Father in heaven is merciful. The world says, fight fire with fire. The kingdom says, conquer fire with water, with spirit, with truth, with love. Because the moment you descend into the realm of evil to wage war, you risk becoming what you oppose. But when you stand in goodness, you become an ambassador of the Most High, even on the battlefield. Overcoming evil with good is not natural, but neither is your calling. You were not born again to be natural. You are not here to echo the world's system, but to overturn it. You are not here to repay insult with insult, but to reveal the power of redemption. Every act of good in the face of evil is a prophetic statement that darkness has not won, that the light still shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So the next time the attack comes, through a word, a wound, a betrayal, remember this: the enemy wants your reaction. Don't give it to him. Give him the opposite. Bless those who curse. Pray for those who persecute. Love those who hate. Do good to those who plan your harm, not because they deserve it, but because that's how evil is defeated. Not mirrored, not matched, overcome, and in doing so, you will not only walk in the footsteps of the Master, you will become the very weapon the enemy cannot comprehend. You will fool him, you will silence him, you will overcome,